Hello, and thank you so much for tuning in to Living in Sarasota Luxury. My name is Mariah Taliaferro. I'm a realtor with Premier Sotheby's International Realty, specializing in downtown Sarasota and the surrounding Keys. If you're looking to relocate to Sarasota, be sure to click the link below, and you can download a relocation guide that gives you great information about relocating to the area. I'm also here with Joe Human, who is the principal of Designs by Human, and with that, we're also going to give you all a really great design guide that he's prepared, so be sure to click the second link below if you'd like to download that. Well, it's really exciting because we have a designer here who has a lot of experience in a very competitive market. I mean, New York City is the most expensive city in the world, if not the United States. And with that comes a certain standard of excellence in service, but also really unique style. And I think that's what you really bring to the table here. Yeah. And that's awesome. So way to go.
Thank you.
Well, as you know, we're here at an active construction site, and you're going to get to see really cool renderings of what Joe has done. But walk us through, what is the process that, someone buys a property, they know that they want to do something exceptional. Where do they go from there?
Yeah, a lot of times, and from my experience, they reach out to either myself or the contractor. A lot of times it comes through you because you're the first point of contact where they're like, hey, this apartment needs a lot of work.
Yeah. And
then we kind of collaborate. But a lot of the process is a lot of upfront work with the client. Deciding what they want to use the space for. Do they want to resell it? Do they want to live here forever?
Yeah.
Those things, and how personal it is. And obviously budget plays a big factor into that, because there's things from the low end to the high end that you can use.
Absolutely. So it's really based on what do they want with a space? Do they want it to just be a comfortable space that they want to get in 6 months, or do they want to make this a representation of them, right? Yeah. So walk us through the process and the difference, but also the collaboration between the architect, the contractor, you, and how all that plays out.
So yeah, my background is from architecture, comes from an architectural background. And so I'd always seen, the interior designers doing these things like picking fabrics and furniture and the lighting. And I was like, why can't I be a part of that, as well as building the walls and the structural component of the things. So I figured out a way to merge those together, and a lot of my clients in New York would come to me in the same fashion, where they're like, we want to buy a new sofa, but also can we tear down this kitchen and this bathroom? So it just kind of came natural to do that. So, in a traditional sense, a decorator is we do furniture.
Yeah.
Traditional sense, a designer will help you do some furniture and wall coverings and lighting, and the architect will do kind of the bones of the space. So while I'm not a licensed architect, I do have that background, and kind of blend those three together. And if we do need specialty people, like a structural engineer or an architect, to be on site for whatever reason, I bring them in and help oversee that, so that way the design process is all cohesive.
I would imagine that because it, like you said, it's very cohesive. It's much more fluid in that way, because you're not having so many parties and hands in the pot and everything. So
one of the simplest explanation of why I do it that no one really thinks about is the outlets. So one of the things that pet peeves, I guess, of mine that I see all the time, especially new developments, is we're putting a bed in a spot and there's an outlet here. It doesn't have USB ports, or it doesn't have something that the client would need practically there. And so those are just things that we catch up front, and I can put those exactly in the middle of the nightstand, or the switch can be a specific height, just so that way when they come in and everything goes in, it's as perfect as we can make it, you know? So there's no redoing things.
That makes a lot of sense. Talk to us about some of your absolute favorite projects that you've done, and maybe throw in some crazy stories.
So one of my probably most favorite projects is I did a 10-story building in Union Square. And it was a development for a client of mine. It took 3 years. I was there on site every day.
Wow.
And just for a lot of those little details, and we sold it out in right away before it was done.
Wow.
It was a $3 million, $3 million 2-bedroom,
Okay.
2-bath, and then there was a $13 million 4-story penthouse.
Wow.
So we added a pool on the top, and it
Incredible.
was just really neat space. So that was an interesting project to learn how a developer mindset works.
Yeah.
You know, every penny counts, but then how do we merge that into doing design details and making it not look like it was a developer unit?
Yeah, that's amazing. And so during that process, of course, with new construction, you create the renderings and you're the inspiration of the project, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that the end consumer is going to use that same design. So would most of them end up utilizing it, or how did that play out in the end product?
Yeah, so in that particular case, all but one client used everything we picked. We had one purchaser that changed one of the countertops.
Oh wow, that's great.
Basically the same countertop, but it was just a little bit different.
So that's very interesting to hear. Very, very cool.
And it was neat to learn in that process, which I've done a couple more times since then, but learn that process of working with someone like yourself who's representing the building and selling it, and then they have their development team, and then the guy who has the money, and then the people buying it. So there's a lot of voices that need to be catered to make it a viable
And it can
build.
also be very difficult sometimes, because when the designer's trying to customize the space, the developer kind of limits what can be done prior to completion, right? And so it's a bit of a difficulty for people, I think. So it's good that when you come from that experience, you know what can be changed, what can't be changed, because you've had that condominium experience. So that's really neat. What are some wacky things that have happened during this, whether it's a new build or a complete renovation?
So there's been several times where I've been locked in private elevators in clients' apartments for hours. There's this client, he actually rented this apartment with the intention to buy it. And so obviously as a rental, you don't want to do too much work, but he's like, no, I'm buying it next month. There, we agreed to it. So we're going to, do wallpaper, do lighting, do all this stuff. So we started doing this whole thing. Obviously at the very end of this story, though, he doesn't end up buying it.
Right.
And the owner comes back and is like, what did you do? It looks great, but what did you do?
Oh my gosh.
But through his process, he was one of the smartest clients I've ever had.
Really?
But he buys and invests in businesses and sells them, and so one of his businesses sold, and I think he had got an infusion of cash of $700-something million, and there was a switch in his personality more. And he was buying Ferraris and buying like stuff was just coming in. And I noticed more when I would come to the apartment, there's like
more parties
and evidence of things that I didn't want to be. So anyways, that happened throughout the process of several months. He ends up buying a place in Vegas.
Okay. Sounds like his crowd right now.
Asking, he's like, hey, Joe, do you want to come do this house in Vegas I just bought? I'm like, sure, that's great. He's like, all right, I'll let you know. A couple days, 2 days pass, he calls me, hey, I'm getting married too. In my head.
Like, this is a classic story of like, once you get money, you go all out. And then
so I'm like, okay, that's great. I'll come out there, So he's like, all right, I'm getting rid of this apartment in New York. This is like a week after we finished everything. I just finished. So I'm like, okay, well, this is about the time the guy the owner comes back and says like, pack up all my things, the new furniture, everything, send it to Vegas. Here's the address. We're closing in a couple days, so it'll be fine. So I spend about a month getting everything coordinated. I pack the truck up. It drives to Vegas. I'm like, hey, the truck will be there, I forget the date, but Saturday between 10 and 2. He's like, great, sounds good, I'll be there. So the drivers from the truck call me, hey, no one's here at the house. So I'm texting him, we're all calling him. I probably called 100 times. They've called 100 for a week. I didn't hear for a week.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me?
So the drivers of the truck are like, hey, we have to come back to New York because I can't just leave this stuff here. So they go back to New York. And then he calls me like a week later. Hey, where's my stuff?
Oh,
why didn't you
my
call
gosh.
me? Like the whole thing, right? It's like,
oh my gosh.
looking at my,
And at that point, you're like, okay.
yeah.
I don't know if I want to be your designer
So I was
anymore.
like, no more after that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
This is probably the part that's interesting that you probably would cut it out for your audience. So when we were packing up his place, the contractor, his name's Rafal, who's actually helping us down here
cool.
on this.
Okay.
The guys from New York. We were cleaning out the closet, and there was like 5 or 6 trash bags that weigh like 80 pounds. And we're like, man, what is in these things? So like, whatever. So we're bringing them out, and he has a storage company that comes and they photograph and inventory what it is, so that way later you're like, oh, I want to deliver that chair, deliver that.
Yeah.
Just pick it. So we open them up, and it's
That many?
I was like,
Oh my gosh.
it was
That's
crazy.
wild.
That is a big inventory.
Like,
Yeah.
holy crap. It's just, people are weird.
This is weird. So me and Milton, as one of the workers, we have to take them to the truck. So we're like, okay, we're taking these bags. And the guy who owns the storage company is like, all right, open them up so I can.
And you're like, no.
I'm like, man, you don't want to see this. He's like, I've seen everything in my day. So he opens it. It's like, well,
Not
I
that.
haven't seen that before. But we were
Oh my gosh.
This is
I would want to wear a hazmat suit at
Yeah.
that point.
So this is, I don't know if you're familiar with New York, Washington Square Park.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it was like right next to that. So I'm carrying this bag across, and it
Oh my
breaks
gosh. Oh.
in the middle of the street.
I would imagine, like, after this whole experience, you kind of realize, like, I just want to design your spaces, not
Yeah.
help you move out of them.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of that back end, like almost personal assistant
Yeah.
stuff that we get involved with. And I guess that was like my precursor to doing all that.
Yeah. So going the extra mile
Yeah.
should be his tagline.
Yeah, right. Details matter, is my
Details matter.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah,
That's even
yeah.
better. Very cool. Well, Joe, I think you're awesome. I love your style.
Thank you.
I think what you do is really phenomenal, and I cannot wait to see the end product of this
come back
property.
in a couple months.
Yeah, I can't wait. Hopefully before the deadline,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But thank you all so much for tuning in. And if you want to contact Joe regarding a project that you want to do, his contact information is below. But be sure to click those links and download the design guide that he's prepared. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Thank you.